A football Friday here on Birds 365. Oh, it'll be a different football Friday when the season gets here. We'll be prepping for an upcoming Eagles game and look forward to doing those. And yes, part of doing a football Friday is football predictions. We don't have to make any of those now, other than the upcoming NFL draft. That is one of several things we're going to talk about with our first guest today. Hopping aboard here on Birds 365 is Nick Fierro, the Allentown Morning Call. Nick, you're out with the Mac and Mac guys. Thanks for being part of Birds 365. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Sorry I get in so late. I thought I was going to be calling in, and I didn't realize this was a
streaming
podcast
show
here, where you're going to be seeing my ugly mug driving people away.
But, well,
they got already driven away to start with, so
you're
not going to win any beauty pageants here.
You're improving the room, Nick. Trust me.
Nick, let me ask you about the upcoming draft, since that's what we were talking about right before I punch you up. Eagles sitting at number 12, 11 overall picks. There is hay to be made here. How much pressure is on Howie Roseman in particular with this year's upcoming draft?
Yeah, I think a lot because of how poorly they performed overall, just, generally over the last, 10 years. They haven't had that many real good ones. And now that they've finally committed to really going young and not trying to, live in the past anymore, they have to start hitting on some guys. I mean, they have 11 picks. If they end up using all 11 and don't make a trade or anything and stay where they're at, they don't necessarily have to hit big on this first pick. But they have to hit big, with some of them. They have to hit a few home runs. Singles don't count anymore. So, they haven't done enough there, and it would just, it would start with a really good number one pick, and it's hard to imagine that they won't get a really good player at number 12.
Well, Nick, I want to talk to you about the collaborative process because what came out this week, the Eagles constantly talk about that. I remember when Joe Douglas was still here, they used that goofy cohabitation matrix term. You remember that? And, they always play up. Everything's collaborative. We welcome ideas from anybody in the organization. And then you hear these stories, and we had some of the athletic guys who did the big expose sort of earlier this week. And, the scouting staff doesn't know what the analytics staff is doing, who's reporting directly to Lurie. We always talk Roseman. Lurie's putting his thumb on the scales for Jalen Hurts, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. And you kind of wrote about that. You kind of foreshadowed that back in the day when there was all the talk about Jim Schwartz undermining Doug Pederson. You never bought this whole collaborative setup. Can you tell us why?
Yeah, because it's just not going to work. I mean, the only reason it worked for so long is because of Doug Pederson's personality. I believe, such an easygoing guy, and he was able to make things work. It's really amazing that the things came together for them so much that won the Super Bowl. And I remember writing that in my column then. It was in September of 2017. It was before that they even started that Super Bowl run, that this was going to end badly between the Eagles and Doug Pederson, even if they did win the Super Bowl, because at some point Doug is going to want to exercise his control or put more of a stamp on the team than he already did. And he was going to be rejected that way, and either that or they don't win the Super Bowl, and he's going to be the scapegoat. And this was kind of a bad setup from the start, and I think it came out of the Chip Kelly thing. I think Jeffrey Lurie was spooked by what happened there, by the 1 year that Chip Kelly had control of the roster and started to wreck it. And they were going in the wrong direction. And I agree that he had to pull the plug on Chip when he did, but then they went in such an opposite direction. And then they got false feedback by winning the Super Bowl, making it worse. And that was really kind of the problem. In a way, winning the Super Bowl kind of got this team going even if further in the wrong direction.
Let's start by working with the assumption, as you said, that the Eagles last 5 years, 7 years, 8 years, drafting has not been good enough. If you have to reach level X and they're coming below that, the drafts haven't been good enough. I believe in the collaborative effect. I think it is the best way to do things, but there is one really important piece to it, and that's the guy at the top of the pyramid. You have to have a guy at the very top who is going to be able to take all that information in, decipher it all, be able to make the selection when the time comes and or the move, if you're trading down or traded up. You need to have that top guy be very good. So if you say the Eagle draft hasn't worked for me, that means Howie Roseman hasn't been able to get his job done. All the others contribute, but it comes down to Howie at the end of the day. Buck stops with him. Has he not gotten the job done because he's not as good an administrator and being able to take all that collaborative information? Is it because he's just not that good a football judge? If the Eagle drafting has been left wanting and we're leaving it at Howie's doorstep, what aspect of the draft, what aspect of Howie's personality is coming up short?
I'm not sure, because I thought you were talking about Lurie if you're talking about at the top. And the further we get into this process, the more it's looking like Lurie is really involved in everything. And maybe, just maybe, Howie Roseman is just doing what Jeffrey Lurie wants. And if that's the case, then he's a pretty good GM, right? I mean, he's not only executing what the owner wants done, but he's taking all the heat for it on top of it. And so that's a pretty good GM as far as the Eagles are concerned. What is it about Howie's personality? I don't know. He's not the worst GM in the league by far. I mean, he's probably right in the middle. He hasn't really hit on that many draft picks, but he's done really well with a lot of veteran signings. He's obviously really good at negotiating contracts and figuring out the cap. The Eagles were really in cap hell this year. They got out of it. They were able to get. I mean, they couldn't get everybody that they wanted, but they weren't. They were able to come through this offseason without getting rid of anybody that they were really counting on for 2021 anyway. That's pretty good. So, but yeah, it really just comes down to hitting on the draft picks. And my feeling is that, a lot of people were talking about Doug Pederson maybe giving up play calling. Maybe it's time for Howie to give up play calling just for 3 days a year.
Nick, you mentioned a word that kind of perked me up there, and that's scapegoating. And I think you're right. I think if you're being fair, Howie Roseman is top half GM in this league. So 32 teams, he's certainly in the top 16, I would say, if you're being fair. But that scapegoating term has kind of defined Jeffrey Lurie to me over the past couple years, post Super Bowl. Because if you think about forcing Mike Rowe out, if you think about forcing Carson Walsh out, these are guys Doug Pederson wanted to keep. Why was he unable to do that? This year, Doug was going to come back, and they asked him his plan. He wanted to elevate Press Taylor to be offensive coordinator, Matt Burke to be defensive coordinator. Jeffrey Lurie didn't like that plan, wanted him to go to a different direction. Doug finally put his foot down. Why the scapegoating? And why, if you're going to scapegoat, to me, certainly position coaches, but even coordinators, I mean, isn't that ignoring the real problem just from a common sense standpoint? Because they don't have as much power as the head coach, the GM, the director of analytics, whomever.
Oh yeah, I mean, and for the owner to make these kinds of judgments on coaches, especially in some cases only after one season, I'm not really getting that. So a lot of these guys came on board just last year, and Lord knows how many of those changes were kind of forced upon Doug to begin with. And now, Doug wants to promote one of them, wanted to promote a couple of them, Press Taylor, and he wanted to promote Briner,
and Briner, and Andrew Briner.
We don't even we never even met Andrew Briner.
Nope. Nope.
It's
Never met
crazy.
him.
It's really crazy. By the way, I was trying to get him for forever through the Eagles because his family's from Easton and local for us. But anyway, wouldn't work out. Couldn't get that worked out. But that just really underscores, I think, a lot of dysfunction there, and the power, and it shows what the power structure is like, and that unless Jeffrey Lurie is making better decisions, this team's going to be in some trouble, because Jeffrey Lurie's got his fingerprints all over this crime scene.
He does, and that was going to be my next point. John, you mentioned Howie in the top half of general managers in the league. In some ways, yes. In other ways, no. And a key one that he's not is, at least in my belief, and again, none of us know this for sure. We're not flies in the room when Jeff Lurie and Howie Roseman are having their conversations. We can assume, we can believe, we can project that Jeff Lurie has X amount of influence on every single personnel move that the Eagles make, but we don't know it for sure. Every once in a while, Howie's got to be able to reel Jeffrey in. He's got to tell him, yeah, Jeff, but, and be able to make a cogent argument why a flip side, a different move, another way to go is actually the better way. You got to be able to talk your boss back every once in a while. I know he's the boss. I'm not telling you what I'm asking Howie Roseman to do is easy. It is not. I acknowledge that. But I think the really good general managers can keep a hands-on owner at least at some distance. So he's not making every single call on every single player. And in that way, I think Howie Roseman has come up short. I think he's been more of a survivor than a take a stand kind of guy that, boss, I love you. I know it's your team. And if you order me to do this, I'll do it. But let me explain to you why going in this different direction is a better way to go for the Philadelphia Eagles. I don't know how often he makes that statement. I don't know how often he takes that chance. And if he doesn't, I can't put him in the top half of general managers in the league.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're right. I got no argument with anything you say there. He's more of a survivor than a doer. And, but we've reached a point here now where maybe we're going to get some more clarity on that. And maybe we'll see some movement there, too, if things don't happen a little bit better with the draft and with the young players that they're getting and how they develop them, too. And, there was it used to be when the Eagles got rid of players, they would never be really amount to much of anything elsewhere, back in the day. But now they're getting rid of players that go and have, decent careers somewhere else, including some of the young players. You wonder how good they were at, or how patient they were maybe with developing, have been with developing guys. But either way, that all falls under the GM. And in this case with the Eagles, the owner. People love to really kind of get on Jerry Jones for, his meddling in the Dallas Cowboys, and he actually is the GM, the self-proclaimed GM. But at least Jerry Jones played Division I football, back in 1873 or whatever it was. But Jeffrey Lurie, didn't. Not that makes you any less qualified or more qualified, but for God's sakes, it's at some point you have to kind of look in the mirror and say, okay, maybe my instincts are not the best, and maybe I have to turn it to my football people and let them go, and just keep my mouth shut for a couple of years and see how that works.
Well, let's run with that, Nick, because I think you're right. But one thing about Jerry Jones, he's not self-proclaimed. He's self-appointed. And what I respect about Jerry Jones is he takes the heat. He loves it. I mean, he loves to hold court. He goes on the radio every week in Dallas. He's got media scrums all the time. Before the pandemic, he was the first guy to have an in-person press conference after the pandemic. At least he holds himself accountable That's my biggest problem with Jeffrey Lurie. We talk to him, twice a year? He does a state of the team address. He generally talks at the league meetings. Other than that, where's Waldo?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, with Jerry, you always know exactly what he's thinking. If we were covering the team, it would be a dream. He's accessible, not just every week, but after every game, before and after every game, during the season, and you know exactly where he stands on things. With Jeffrey Lurie, we have so many questions built up. With the two media access availabilities that we have with them per year, that we end up getting bogged down. And when are you going to be able to change your go back to the Kelly Green throwback because of the helmet rule and all that stuff? And so that stuff we shouldn't even that stuff shouldn't even be coming up in these meetings because we have too many other things to unpack. But unfortunately, that's what happens. And it's
well, we do get a wave at practice every once in a while. That's about it. We get a wave at practice every once in a while.
But I think now, though, I think after everything that's come out, maybe that the direction is going to change here the next time Jeffrey Lurie does make himself available. That would be interesting. To answer questions. There won't be any more softballs thrown at him. It will be about exactly how he is involved and what he's doing to affect change on this team, and if he trusts his football people enough to let them go without his intervention.
All right, Nick, we've talked plenty about off the field and front office stuff. Let's bring it back onto the field. Season ends, Birds are 4-11-1. There's a reason that they had the 6th pick in the draft, now have the 12th traded back, but had the 6th pick in the draft. That allows a year, and the standings say so. All 3 teams in the NFC least, and I do use that word because I mean it, finished ahead of them. They got a lot of work to do to make up, to get above the Washington football team, the Dallas Cowboys, and the New York Giants. During this offseason, I think the 3 teams that finished ahead of them have also done more to improve their roster than the Eagles have. Here's where I'll cut Howie Roseman some slack. He helped to create the cap mess that the Eagles were in. He has worked hard to get them into a position to get some free agents. They didn't have much space at all, so their free agent additions have been okay at best, which is better than nothing. But I do believe all 3 teams in the division have improved more via free agency than the Eagles. Is that a fair statement?
I would say probably, yeah, they have. But I want to say this too, that, and it was just the same thing, coming out of 2015 and coming out of 2016. That I don't know that the Eagles are a 4-11-1 team personnel wise. They had a lot of injuries last year. Of course, they've had a lot of injuries every year. The whole Doug Pederson era could be described as that. Even the Super Bowl year, but it had things not going sideways with that offensive line last year. When you're losing starters and then you're losing backups and then your backups to the backups, maybe they would have won the division at least, and been in the playoffs. And then we might be looking at a whole different situation. We're talking about difference of only maybe 2 games in that situation. Are they really that deficient in personnel? Well, I think they're close actually on offense. And I think that, with defense, depending on the scheme, that they need some, they definitely need some players. But are they a 4-11-1 personnel squad? No, I don't think so. And I think that the thought that it's going to take 3 years to turn this around. Oh, there's no more 3 years in the league.
Yeah, no.
If they're not, if they're not back in the play, every coach that Jeffrey Lurie has ever hired since he's become the owner has had the Eagles in the playoffs within 2 seasons. I would expect the same here, or things might be changed with Nick Sirianni.
Talking with Nick Fierro, my buddy from the Allentown Morning Call. Read his stuff. He does a great job. mcall.com. Nick, you mentioned that offensive line. That's what I kind of hang my hat on. There's a lot of ifs, but if Brandon Brooks is healthy, if Lane Johnson is healthy, if Jason Kelsey keeps playing at an all-pro level, there's no way this is a 4-win team. I mean, that's a top 5 offensive line in the NFL, even with Andre Dillard, Jordan Mailata, whoever wins that sort of battle for left tackle. And then you have Isaac Seumalo, who's solid but not great. That's a pretty good offensive line, and that's a good foundation for Nick Sirianni and a first-time starting quarterback in Jalen Hurts. Is that how you see it?
Exactly. I think that they not only, if they're healthy, then they not only have a really good offensive line, but they have some depth pieces there too. Because I believe I'm kind of a glass half full guy on these some of these younger players. I believe that Andre Dillard is actually going to be a good player. I know he had.
So do I.
I think it was a maturity issue with him that first year. He really didn't react to being moved to the right side. He had that incident in training camp where he had to fight and he was in tears. That happens with some players. I think he's going to come through it just fine because I think he's got the ability. And for that matter, I think that Jalen Reagor is going to be a really good wide receiver too. I think he was hurt last year by 2 different injuries. One right before the start of the regular season that threatened him being available for the opener. He actually ended up playing, but then he got hurt again and he missed time. I think that his biggest problem was route running, but I think he wants to be great. I know he wants to be great, and as long as he wants to be, and I think the Eagles can mold him into a really good receiver, down the road, at least as good as Nelson Aguilar became for them in that 3rd year. And I don't think it'll take that long for Reagor to be that, and I don't think he'll have a regression either, like Aguilar did. I think there'll be some. I think he could be better than that, and will be better than that. So I think that they have the makings of a really good offense. Even without Zach Ertz, who's probably not going to be in the picture, they still have an up and coming tight end, Dallas Goedert. They have really good running backs. Now they brought Jordan Howard back. I was really surprised about Jordan Howard last year when they brought him back, and they only promoted him for a couple of games, and I thought he was just going to be in the rotation the whole rest of the way, but he wasn't for whatever reason. But I still think he's only 26 years old, and not a bad backup, for Miles Sanders, and a pretty good system. And maybe they add to that in the draft too. Of course, they also have Boston Scott. They have some offensive pieces, I believe, that are going to function a lot better this year under a quarterback who I believe is going to have a good career too in Jalen Hurts. Let's not think that the Eagles are going to go have another 4-win season. I think that would be a disaster if they did, even if they hit on nobody else here on the draft.
Let me ask you a question about a guy you mentioned and his acquisition. Jalen Reagor could have a better sophomore season. I think we all agree on that. But about his selection when he was taken in the draft, somebody wrote about it yesterday. I'd give them credit, and I just don't remember exactly who it was, so I apologize. But it was mentioned that when that selection was made, rather than Jefferson, a lot of cooks putting together the broth on that one, a lot of opinions registered, including that of Lincoln Riley, the head coach of Oklahoma.
That was probably me, Jody.
Was it you? Could very well have been.
Yeah.
And I trust John's sources and writings and everything, so I'm sure that was the case, that Lincoln Riley was asked an opinion and he gave it, and it may have influenced the Eagles in selecting him. If that's accurate, if that's true, why isn't Lincoln Riley the head coach of the Eagles? If he has enough influence over Howie Roseman to have sway over their first-round draft pick, the Eagles had an opening at coach this year. They fired Doug Pederson, and it was a good couple weeks before Nick Sirianni got the job. Why couldn't Howie Roseman talk Lincoln Riley into coming and taking over the Eagles? Because I don't know about you guys, but the 2 weeks before they hired Sirianni, I continued to say the one guy I would like to see the Eagles hire is Lincoln Riley, the quarterback maker at Oklahoma. If there's anybody that can get Jalen Hurts to this next level, it's the guy who took him in from Alabama and made him a Heisman Trophy finalist. Why isn't Lincoln Riley the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles?
That's a great question, and that's something I was thinking about too, because wasn't he one of the first guys that they contacted?
First guy they called. First guy they called.
I don't think he was too interested in it.
Lincoln's too smart. That's why.
Yeah, he knows the power structure. He didn't want any parts of this. He's so much better at Oklahoma than he would be, coming to the Eagles, even if it did mean a lot more money and the prestige of the NFL. Well, so what? I mean, he's already making a pretty good living. It's not like he's. I think. Look at the candidates the Eagles went after before they finally landed on Nick Sirianni. And this is no knock on Sirianni. He might turn out to be a great coach. It's kind of like Andy Reid did, but at the time nobody knew who he was. But I believe Brian Dable from Buffalo didn't even interview with him.
No.
Just turned down an interview. I mean, what is that telling you? This guy's the hottest name coming out. Of course, he didn't get a job with anybody else either. But Lincoln Riley. Yeah, I think he was just too smart for that.
Yeah. Brandon Staley's another guy who turned down an interview. Jody's guy, Robert Saleh, did interview, but that was pretty much as a courtesy. I think Arthur Smith was as a courtesy. I mean, people around this league, the hot candidates, saw this structure and said, I don't want any part of it. And Nick's right. It's not about Nick Sirianni. I mean, Andy Reid was successful. He wasn't on anybody's radar. Doug Pederson wasn't on anybody's radar. Nick Sirianni might be the next Bill Walsh, but he didn't have power like these guys had power. He wasn't a hot candidate, and that's what the Eagles were down to because of the way they handled their business. And I think, Nick knows that. I know that, and that's where we are with the Philadelphia Eagles.
If that's the case, can we then say the Eagles actually got lucky with Doug Pederson? That if he was a coach that not necessarily anybody else wanted, and 2 years in he won the Super Bowl, that's pretty lucky, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. They got lucky with Doug Pederson. They got lucky with Andy Reid. For that matter, they got lucky with Chip Kelly that first year, the first 2 years, winning 10 games each time. Especially because Kelly had no NFL experience whatsoever. That's the part that I didn't like about it. He hadn't even been in the league for like a year as an assistant coach or anything like that, and that's tough. But yeah, he absolutely lucky. And the coaches, like John was saying, around the league, they know this, and it's not just with the personnel. It's not just the roster and the assistant coaches, and you don't even have control over the 53-man. It's play calling. I mean, everybody's all Doug about play calling. He's got people talking, everybody talking at me, right? What's that song? He's got people in his headphones, with analytics saying we need to go for it on fourth down here. And not only do we need to go for it on fourth down, but we need to call this specific play. And that's a tough job. And I don't think coaches want to have that.
Really tough job. Now, Nick, I know you're in South Carolina, right? How much golfing are we talking about?
So I'll be out there a little later today. I took a break there yesterday, but yeah.
Well, I appreciate you taking time out of your day to talk with us on Birds 365.
I want to get one more question in for our boy Nick, because I'm going to ask it of every guy over the next 10 days who joins us here. John and I have a little debate going. He thinks that at number 12, the Eagles will stick to their historical bent when it comes to drafting. In the first half of the first round, they go to the trenches, be it defensive line or offensive line. I think they're going to the outside. I think the pick will either be a wide receiver and or a cornerback. Look into that crystal ball of yours, Nick. The Eagles at number 12 select. You don't even have to give us a name. Just give us a position.
Trench. Defensive end, Quiddy Pay.
Yes.
For Michigan.
Yes.
They're going to transition from one Michigan guy, Brandon Graham, to another.
There we go. That's a brilliant pick. Great minds.
You guys spend too much time in the locker room together. That's just
not
sad.
Anymore.
That's right. I don't remember what the locker room looks like.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know that I would be doing that myself. To me, I would go outside the box and look at a linebacker like Micah Parsons at Penn State, who would be a great fit as their middle linebacker, especially in a cover two, a guy that can run down the field and everything. But they don't value that position. I really can't see them making that pick.
Yeah.
I'm not as big a slave to history as you guys are that believe the Eagles have to do what they've always done, but that one smacks you upside the head. They haven't taken an Eagle linebacker in the first round since when? 1970 what?
79.
Jerry Robinson. Yeah, that trend is staying in place. They will not be taking a linebacker at number 12. I feel pretty confident. I'm with you guys on that one. History will repeat itself. The Eagles will not be taking a linebacker in the first round this year.
Well, how quickly we forget Marcus Smith, but he was a linebacker.
Well, he was more of an edge guy, yeah. He was
and even Jerry Robinson, back in 79, they were still playing a 3-4 then.
Yeah.
But the last time they actually drafted a linebacker in the first round for a 4-3 defense, you have to go back to, I think, 1970. Steve Zabel.
Yeah.
We're talking.
Now, there's some good knowledge right there from Nick Sierra.
And Steve Zabel did such a great job running NFL films for all those years thereafter. Just outstanding.
Right. It might as well, but yeah.
Nick, great stuff. Hit him long and strong today. If you get out there on the course, you did so with us. Thank you much for hopping aboard. Oh, we'll be calling back and we'll be zooming you into our lives.
Oh, it's great. It was a great time. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks,
Nick Fierro from the Allentown Morning Call, doing a good job, except for the fact that he agrees with McMullen that the Eagles are going into.
And by the way, Nick brings up a good point, Jody. It's not a matter of what I think the Eagles should do.
Right.
It is history. It is what I mean, I know this team. That's what they typically do. Now, can they throw a curveball? Anybody can throw a curveball. Maybe they wake up and say, these guys aren't good enough. These players are better. But that's just not their history. That's just not what they believe in.
So, in other words, I'm an optimist because I believe they will break their trends and actually make the right pick, the correct pick, what they need to do. You, on the other hand, believe that history will repeat itself and they'll do what they always do, which would be a mistake, which would be overdrafting a pay.
Well, two things, Jody. I think it's in general, in a vacuum, it's correct. I think offense and defensive line, other than quarterback, that's where you build a football team. Where the problem comes in, the difficulty comes in, this isn't a great year, especially on the defensive line at the top of the draft. There's some good guys, some good value a little bit later. Offensive linemen, there's good players, but, Sewell's going to be gone. Slater most likely is going to be gone. Vera Tucker, is he worthy of being number 12 overall? Plus, the strength of their team is already the offensive line. So those are the outliers that maybe move you in a different direction. But this team correctly believes that's where you build. The issue is, in a certain year, and obviously we're in 2021, is it the right decision in 2021? I probably agree with you. It's probably not. But that's what they have a tough time getting away from what they believe.
We'll talk about that. All right, we've got get a quick timeout here at the top of the hour, and then John Clark's going to join us about less than 25 minutes from now with his new podcast on NBC Sports Philadelphia.
Take off with John Clark.
Airport himself, taking off with John Clark. He's going to take off with us. I want to further this conversation with John when we come back about how you make that decision. When you are on the clock, the Eagles will be there, we assume, at number 12. Is there a possibility they trade up? Yes. Is there a possibility they trade back? Yes. But for the sake of today's conversation, I want to talk about if they just stay at 12, how they make that decision, not in a vacuum, in the reality of 2021, how I think the team should do it. We'll get John's opinion on how they should do it as well. Coming back right here on Birds 365, McDonald and McMullen with you.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.